In a time when war was a constant, an empire's success relied not just on the bravery of its soldiers, but also on the tools and tactics that put them ahead of their enemies. Rome, with its unparalleled ability to innovate and adapt, revolutionized the art of warfare with inventions that forever changed the battlefield. These innovations not only secured decisive victories, but also defined how battles were fought for centuries. The pilum, a throwable spear that was much more than just a weapon, challenged enemy defenses by breaking upon impact, rendering shields useless and leaving opponents vulnerable. The testudo formation, or tortoise formation, provided nearly impenetrable protection against arrows and projectiles, allowing the legions to advance with safety and precision. And when it came to besieging and conquering fortified cities, Roman siege engines like the battering ram and siege towers were the tools that made Rome the master of siege warfare. In this video, we'll delve into these and other Roman military innovations, exploring how each was developed and how they transformed the course of battles, enabling Rome to expand its empire almost relentlessly. Get ready to discover how Roman ingenuity and strategy created an army that not only fought but changed the rules of the game of war, ensuring that the name of Rome echoed as that of an unbeatable military power in history. From its earliest days, Rome was always surrounded by enemies that threatened its existence. From wars against the Etruscans to clashes with the Carthaginians, the city-state found itself constantly compelled to innovate to maintain power. Initially, Rome followed warfare practices inspired by its neighbors, but the need for survival and expansion required constant evolution in the military field. It was not enough to be brave, one had to be strategically superior. Over the centuries, the Roman army became a feared force known for its discipline, organization, and adaptability. The Romans carefully observed their adversaries, learning from their failures and adopting their virtues. This process of assimilation meant that Rome not only imitated the warfare tactics of other peoples, but perfected them relentlessly. While other civilizations were content with what they already knew, Rome made military innovation its trademark. In addition to tactics, Roman infrastructure was also a crucial factor in its rise. The construction of roads, which facilitated the rapid movement of troops, and the development of weapons and siege engines were some of the pillars of Roman military might. But the real difference lay in the ability to turn these innovations into effective combat practices, using the knowledge gained from battles to refine their strategies. The battlefield became a laboratory for experiments. Over time, the need to maintain a vast and efficient army led to profound reforms, such as those implemented by Gaius Marius at the end of the 2nd century BC. These reforms not only professionalized the Roman army, but also introduced new weapons and tactics that would revolutionize the art of war forever. The Roman soldier, now well-trained and equipped with innovative tools, was prepared to face any enemy on any terrain. For Rome, war was a science in constant evolution. Its legions relied not only on brute force, but also on precision and strategic planning. From this point, some of the most notable inventions in military history emerged, such as the pilum, a weapon that would not only change the fate of individual battles, but also symbolize Rome's innovative power on the battlefield. The pilum was much more than a simple throwing spear. Its creation represented Roman ingenuity in finding practical solutions to the challenges faced in warfare. Unlike other spears used by contemporary armies, the pilum was designed to be both a lethal weapon and a disarmament tool. Its design allowed it, upon hitting an enemy's shield, to bend the shaft's weight, rendering the protection useless and forcing the opponent to abandon it. Thus, the Roman soldier not only attacked, but also disarmed his adversary. The composition of the pilum was unique. It consisted of a long wooden shaft, usually around 2 meters in length, with an iron tip about 30 centimeters long. The secret lay in the junction between the wooden shaft and the iron tip, which was intentionally designed to deform upon impact. This meant that, unlike other spears, the pilum could not be reused by the enemy, making it a one-time but decisive weapon. This feature was crucial in encounters where enemies relied heavily on shields for protection. The impact of the pilum on the battlefield was devastating. In a coordinated attack, Roman legions would hurl hundreds of pilums at the enemy, creating a wave of projectiles that shattered enemy lines. Opponents, unable to use their shields for protection, became easy targets for the ensuing hand-to-hand combat. This strategic element was crucial, as it not only destabilized the adversary, but also provided a psychological advantage to the Romans, who could advance confidently against a vulnerable enemy. In addition to its effectiveness in disarming the enemy, the pilum was also designed to be deadly. Its thin, sharp tip easily penetrated light armor, causing severe or fatal injuries. Even if the opponent managed to defend themselves, the impact was enough to create a breach in the enemy's line. The use of this weapon reflected the pragmatic approach of the Romans. Each innovation was not created merely for destruction, but to maximize combat efficiency. The pilum became a symbol of the Roman legion, a weapon that represented both the destructive power and military cunning of Rome. Its invention not only changed the way the Romans fought, but also forced their enemies to rethink their own tactics, demonstrating the impact that a single innovation can have on the course of a war. The testudo formation, or tortoise formation, was one of the most iconic and effective tactics of the Roman army. Its name derived from the peculiar shape soldiers assumed when organizing their shields, creating a complete cover around and above the legion. Much like the shell of a tortoise, this formation protected the troops from projectiles launched by enemies, proving especially useful in siege battles or advances against fortified positions. It was a strategy that combined discipline, precision, and cooperation, hallmarks of the Roman legion. The organization of the testudo required impeccable coordination among the soldiers. Those in the front line held their shields up at chest height, protecting themselves from direct attacks. Meanwhile, soldiers in the central ranks raised their shields above their heads, forming an overhead cover. This combination created a nearly impenetrable barrier against arrows, spears, and even stones thrown during siege battles. The effectiveness of this formation lay in its unity. Each soldier depended on the others to maintain the protection intact. The visual and psychological impact of the testudo was also significant. Seeing a legion advancing in a compact formation often struck fear into the hearts of enemies. Arrows and projectiles that would normally decimate unprotected ranks simply ricocheted off the shields, while the Romans maintained a steady and orderly advance. This tactic allowed the Roman army to move safely until reaching a favorable position where hand-to-hand combat could be fought with superiority. In addition to its resistance to ranged attacks, the testudo was also a flexible formation. Depending on the situation, it could be adapted to different types of terrain or to respond to specific enemy tactics. This versatility made it a key element in conflicts where Rome faced large numbers of enemies or prolonged sieges. Even against more numerous opponents, the Romans' ability to remain protected and organized gave them an unparalleled strategic advantage. The testudo exemplified the Roman military spirit. It wasn't just about brute force, but about intelligence and adaptability. It was a demonstration of how Rome succeeded not only through the skill of its soldiers, but through the way it coordinated its troops in innovative and effective tactics. On the battlefield, this impenetrable formation became one of the reasons why Roman legions were considered invincible. When it came to conquering fortified cities, Rome was relentless. While many ancient armies struggled with the challenges of besieging fortresses, the Romans developed a series of siege engines that gave them a strategic advantage. Among these were the battering ram, siege towers, and catapults, which were decisive in the fall of numerous enemy cities. These inventions transformed siege warfare from a slow and uncertain operation into a precise and calculated exercise, allowing Rome to expand its dominion over vast territories. The battering ram was one of the simplest yet incredibly effective tools. It consisted of a large wooden trunk, often reinforced with a metal tip, used to break down gates and walls. Protected by a covered structure, the battering ram allowed Roman soldiers to continuously attack enemy defenses safely until they breached a gap. The force of the impact, repeated with precision, was sufficient to bring down even the most robust walls, allowing the legions to invade the city swiftly. Siege towers, on the other hand, were mobile structures with several levels that allowed Roman soldiers to approach enemy walls safely. These towers were moved up to the fortified city walls and, once positioned, allowed soldiers to attack directly from above. The use of siege towers not only neutralized the advantage of elevated walls, but also provided the Romans with a privileged attack position, enabling them to dominate the battlefield more effectively. Another essential siege engine was the catapult and ballista, weapons capable of launching projectiles over long distances. These engines allowed the Romans to bombard enemy defenses continuously, wearing down their opponents before launching a direct assault. The accuracy of these weapons was impressive, and their ability to destroy walls, defensive towers, and even entire buildings made them a fundamental component of any siege operation. Combined with other tactics and weapons, catapults were a true force of destruction in the hands of the Roman army. The use of siege engines was further proof of the Roman skill in planning and executing complex strategies. Instead of relying solely on numerical strength, Rome used its advanced engineering to methodically undermine enemy defenses. This approach allowed the Romans to face powerfully fortified cities and still emerge victorious. For the Romans, siege warfare was a science, and the engines they developed were crucial to the success of their conquest campaigns. Rome was a civilization that knew how to learn from its mistakes, but even more importantly, it knew how to leverage the lessons from its enemies. While some armies stuck to their own traditions, the Romans excelled at observing, adapting, and improving the tactics and weapons of other cultures. The ability to absorb what worked in enemy armies and incorporate it into their own style of warfare was one of the great secrets behind Roman expansion. Every battle was a learning opportunity, and each new conquest brought innovations that would transform the Roman army into an even more lethal force. Historical examples of adapted weapons and tactics abound in Roman military history. One of the most emblematic cases was the use of the gladius, a short sword that became the symbol of the Roman legion. Originally inspired by the weapons used by Iberian warriors, the gladius was adopted by the Romans due to its effectiveness in close combat. Its short blade allowed for quick and precise strikes, ideal for the intense and close battles fought by the legions. By recognizing the value of this design, Rome turned the gladius into one of its primary combat tools. Another example of strategic adaptation came from the Punic Wars, where the Romans faced the Carthaginian army led by Hannibal. After suffering several defeats at the hands of the brilliant strategist, Rome was forced to rethink its tactics. Instead of insisting on direct confrontations, the Romans began to avoid open battles and focus on a war of attrition, cutting off Hannibal's supply lines. This tactical adaptation showcased Rome's flexibility in learning from its defeats and turning the situation to its advantage, culminating in the final victory over Carthage. In addition to weapons and tactics, Rome also incorporated cultural elements from its enemies, leveraging local knowledge to expand its military capabilities. During the occupation of Greece, for example, the Romans learned a great deal about siege warfare and Greek military innovations. The war machines used by the Greeks, such as catapults and siege towers, were refined by Roman engineers, resulting in a crucial technological advantage in future Roman campaigns. Rome's ability to adapt and evolve based on the lessons learned from its enemies was not merely a matter of survival. It was a deliberate strategy to ensure supremacy. This open-minded approach to learning and innovation allowed Rome to continue growing, regardless of the challenges that arose. Roman military innovations were often the result of a clever combination of observation and reinvention, turning defeats into opportunities to build a stronger and more resilient army.